All right. Right. Welcome to the session about cash flow management, co-hosted by Nathan and me, Alice. I think while we wait people to trickle in, I'm gonna start by going through some of the logistics with the team, and then we'll do an intro of me and Nathan, and then we will dive right into the core topic all of you are interested to chat today. Okay, sounds good. Well, welcome again. Nathan and I were very excited to talk about a very important topic, especially in today's climate, about cash flow management for CPG startups. This session is co-hosted by me and Nathan. Recently, I have launched a community called Finance for CPG Founders. I think Nathan, as a fellow fractional CFO, we pretty much share a very common goal, is to help educate CPG founders. Many of you may not come from the financial world, to be more aware, more conscious, and more, I would say, more, how should I say, smart and better and manage your financials, especially about cash flow. In today's world, as we know that, unlike probably back in 2015, it's growth at all cost, but today's world, whenever you go to talk to lenders, talk to investors, being, I would say, profitability is a very important metric, and also have enough cash flow, have enough cash runway is also very important, especially for the startup CPG founders. So anyway, without further ado, I'm gonna start by just going through quickly a few logistics. This will be a webinar co-hosted by Nathan and me. It's part of the Finance for CPG Founders community. If you want to join it, I'm gonna post the link in the chat channel. It's also part of the sponsorship by my startup company. I'm co-founder and CEO of MyPocketCFO, which is an all-in-one platform to help startup CPG founders to produce lender and investor-friendly, lender and investor-ready financials in hours. With that being said, it's gonna be a webinar format. Nathan gonna be our main speaker, my guest speaker. Very excited to have Nathan, very experienced. I'm gonna let Nathan to introduce himself in 1 minute, 30 seconds. But Nathan will be the speaker for the first half of the webinar. I kindly ask all of you to be on mute, so to allow our speaker to cover the main content. And then after that, we'll get into Q&A session. Please, if you have a question, you can type in the chat box. I will monitor that. You can raise your hand, and either me or Nathan will call your name to do the live Q&A session and discussion. After that, I think if we have more time, obviously, welcome to join the discussion. With that being said, I'm gonna pass the floor to Nathan. Nathan, you want to do a self-intro?
Sure. Thank you so much, Alice. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. It's been great collaborating with you and getting to know you over the last few months. So thank you very much for the opportunity. So guys, as Alice mentioned, my name is Nate, and I'm the founder of a business called Future Ready, which basically provides fractional CFO services for emerging consumer brands. If it's okay, I'm actually going to take a slightly different approach to the intro and kind of explaining what I do. And I'm actually going to kind of trickle it through as we go through the presentation here. And I will have a little bit more to say at the end. But out of respect for everyone's time, if you guys are okay with it, I'm kind of want to just dive into the content here and start digging in. So the agenda for today is, as hopefully you all recognize, we're here to talk about cash flow management, specifically for CPG startups. More specifically than that, we're going to be looking at the way, or I guess the impact of decisions around how you make, source, and sell your product, basically looking at how they can have a very, very outsized impact on the cash needs of your business. Now, the cash needs of any company will in turn have a very, very profound impact on the way that you think about financing that business. Obviously, if you have, small needs and you only need money for a short amount of time, you might be looking at debt. But if you have very large needs and you're needing that capital for a very long period of time, then you're more likely to be looking at equity or other forms of capital, right? So the general agenda that we're going to be going through today, I need to introduce to you, if you're not already familiar, the concept of a cash conversion cycle. It's a really kind of important piece of theory that we need to get to make sense of everything else. After that, we're going to be looking at a simple example or case study that we'll use to kind of demonstrate some of these key points and really help you guys understand how some of these decisions about the way that you set up and run your business can really, really have a huge impact here. And as Alice mentioned, we'll wrap up with Q&A at the end. Okay, so the cash conversion cycle. The way I want you to imagine this is that any business is kind of like a tube or a funnel, right? Things come in at one end and come out at the other end. And the cash conversion cycle basically refers to the length of that tube or funnel that is your business. So what happens at the beginning is that you have inventory or product coming in. You'll eventually sell that inventory, and then some period later, you will get paid for that inventory or the sales that you're generating by your customers. And so this concept of a cash conversion cycle, which basically explains this whole tube, is really important for two reasons. Number one is that when cash is inside of this cycle, it cannot be accessed, right? If you've got $100,000 worth of inventory sitting on the factory floor, you can't do anything with that $100,000 other than have it sit there, right? You cannot use that money for payroll. You cannot use that money to run your Facebook ads. That cash is basically tied up until you're able to monetize that inventory and get the cash from the other end of the tube. So really what we're talking about here is kind of the efficiency at which you can move cash through the business, right? And the other reason that this is a really important concept is that, let's face it, cash is scarce, right? Interest rates are up. VCs are not lending as much as they were. As Alice mentioned, there's been a big shift over the last couple of years in terms of it was growth at all costs, but now people are becoming much, much more focused on cash and profitability because it is much more scarce than it was. So if you actually look at the formula or equation for the cash conversion cycle, it has three parts. So it's made up of the days of inventory outstanding, which is basically your inventory holding period, plus the days of sales or receivables that you have outstanding, less the days payable that you have outstanding. So the cash conversion cycle is basically this kind of purple square that I'm showing on the bottom. So the goods, the products starting on the left, they're kind of moving through the business as you go kind of left to right here. So to put some actual numbers on this, hopefully this will make it a little bit clearer. Let's say that we have 2 months of inventory sitting on the floor. That would be roughly 60 days, right? And if we then had a customer who was paying us 90 days after we delivered the goods, then we would have 90 days accounts receivable period. So 60 plus 90 equals 150. But that's offset a little bit by the accounts payable period. So we might negotiate terms with our vendor or supplier, and we might have an agreement with them where we don't have to pay them right away, and maybe we can pay them 30 days later, in which case, again, that would offset it. So the cash conversion cycle in this example here will be 60 plus 90 less 30 gives you 120 days. Hopefully that concept is pretty clear. Now, one of the things that I can offer as a fractional CFO is financial statement analysis and benchmarking. And there's many, many ways that we can do that using both public and private companies. But the example that I'm showing you here is a method called comparable company analysis. There's half a dozen companies here, hopefully a few names that you might recommend. And I am, if it's okay, Alice, I'd actually like to ask some questions here. Maybe people could put an answer in the chat. So my question for you guys is, why do you think that the Shake Shack numbers are also low? Whether it's the sales number, the inventory number, payables, cash conversion cycle, like Shake Shack is pretty close to zero on all of these things. Does anyone have an idea of why that might be the case? Well,
Feel free to type your guess in the chat. All right,
yes,
Nara typed.
perishable items. Perfect. That is definitely part of it. So is it Miggy or Nara? Miggy. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Miggy. Yes. So yes, definitely perishable items. So we're talking, food here. These are things that do not have a long shelf life. You cannot, leave this stuff sitting around for months and months, or otherwise it'll go bad. Dimitri's also mentioned that restaurants have a POS cash flow. So I think what you're getting at there is that these restaurants like Shake Shack, they're selling to regular customers. Like when I go to Shake Shack and buy a burger or meal, I don't get payment terms, do I? Right? I have to pay then and there. They're not going to let me take the product away unless I pay for it at that very moment. So, the customers don't really have payment terms. They have highly perishable items. So they have a very, very short cash conversion cycle. The cash comes in and out of that business very, very quickly. What about a business like McCormick? I assume you guys know who that is, but McCormick is like the spice company. You've probably seen these little 2 or 3 ounce shakers that they have where you get your turmeric and your pepper and your, paprika or whatever. Does anyone want to have a guess at why their cash conversion cycle would be so much longer than all of the others? So what we're looking at here is kind of the peachy colored item. It's this one here that I got my mouse over. It's significantly longer than anyone else here. Again, happy to, take questions. Tristan, buy bulk. Yes, that would be a pretty good reason. So what you're saying there is, Tristan, you're saying, okay, we're buying bulk. So yes, we're buying a lot of inventory at a time. And that would definitely explain why this purple number is so high, right? They have a very, very high days of inventory outstanding because they're buying in large quantities. I think maybe it's probably got a bit to do with a lot of their products are fairly shelf stable, not indefinitely, but like you compare salt or pepper to lettuce and tomatoes over at Shake Shack, those goods are going to be able to sit on the shelf for a lot longer. And probably the way that they sell these products has got a lot to do with it as well. They're probably selling a lot of their product on payment terms. Unlike Shake Shack, whose customers have to pay right away, a customer of McCormick is more likely to get payment terms. So I guess the point is that like when you kind of dive into this stuff and look at the businesses and think about the products, what do they sell? How would you buy that sort of material? How would you sell that sort of material? Like it can become pretty clear pretty quickly, like who are the relevant comparables to you and, provide some useful context and understanding to what your own numbers might look like. And again, this is kind of the work of fractional CFOs. It's one of the things that we do. But anyway, what I wanted to do now, enough of the theory, what I want to do now is actually move into our case study example, and I'm going to call it the Simple Widget Co. This is a really, really nice little business. Basically, what it does is it's buying product or raw materials for $25 at a time, and it's then selling that product to its customers for $100. So another question, I am looking in the chat again here, and I want to know how much profit is this company making? $25 product or raw materials and $100 sale. So how much profit is being generated every time they do this? This is not a trick question. Guys are maybe a little shy. So the answer is 75. Perfect. Thank you, Tristan, Latasha. Thank you. You guys got it right. $75. That's exactly what's going on here. And to keep this example really simple, I'm going to assume that we're doing the same thing every month, okay? So in our simple little widget code business here, every single month we got $100 of sales, $25 of COGS, and $75 of profit, okay? Now, the first version of this business has basically, think back to the Shake Shack example, right? We've got a really, really short cash conversion cycle. Stuff's coming in and out really, really quickly. So the way that you could potentially set this up in real life, if you're an e-com operator, is maybe you have a marketplace type business, right? So you don't need to order your products months in advance. Maybe you've got a local supplier. Okay, and maybe they live across the road. So you sell the product, you run across the road, you buy the raw materials, you come back, you ship it to your customer. Another way you could potentially do this is with drop ship. When you're a drop shipper, you can collect an order, you digitally send it to another vendor or supplier, and they actually fulfill it for you. So, there's a number of ways that you could conceivably do this with an e-commerce business. But the point is that in this example, we have a really, really short, basically a 0-day cash conversion cycle. So let's look at a financial model of what this business would actually be doing. So as I said, we got $100 of revenue, 25 COGS, and 75 of EBITDA or operating income here. Now, what you can see down the bottom row is I've shown you the ending cash balance. So in month 2, which is here, obviously. So in month 2, that $75 worth of profit, we can put that in the bank. We don't really have anything else we need to spend it on quite now. And so what we're going to do is come back in month 3, and we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to generate another $75. And so at the end of month 3, how much will we have in the bank? Well, it's 75 plus 75. We've got $150, right? And that's just going to keep going on into perpetuity. So question time again. I'm going to give you guys 3 options. And I want to know how you think is the best way to finance this business. Would you finance this business, A, for debt? You can just write A, you don't need to write debt. Would you go A, for debt? Would you go B, for equity? Or would you say C, I think I want to bootstrap it? A, debt, B, equity, C, bootstrap it. Okay, we've got a few C's. We've got some A's, C's, B's, E's. Okay, bit of a range here. A few different options. Well, they could all be right. I would personally probably lean towards bootstrapping it because really we don't need a whole lot of cash to get this thing off the ground, right? From a very, very early point on, we're generating cash. We've got good margin. Our cash balance is just going up and up and up. So really, we don't actually need too much of in terms of external capitals or support here. There's obviously a lot of other factors that could be at play. So it's entirely possible that another answer could be right as well. But I would probably lean towards, bootstrapping here. So let's make this a little bit more complicated. Let's introduce our inventory holding period. And one of the reasons that we might want to get into this is because we are wanting to lower our unit costs, okay? We had a conversation with our supplier and they said, look, yeah, I can do 1,000 pieces at $25 a unit, but if you buy 10,000 pieces, I'm willing to lower my cost to only $15 or $20 a unit, so you get a better deal. And you're going to sit there and think, that's quite attractive. My unit economics improve if I do that, and my margin will go up. So that's, commonly a way or a reason that people might think about investing their cash into an inventory holding period. So what we now have is a delay between when the goods are purchased and when, the cash is being collected. At this point, we do not have any payment terms, okay? So neither the customers nor the vendor or suppliers are giving us payment terms. Both are happening when those transactions take place. So let's look at the model again. First thing I want you to notice is that the P&L is exactly the same as before, okay? To clarify, we're only looking at the P&L down to, say, the EBITDA level here, or the operating income. But to this point, at least, it's exactly the same as before. We got $75 profit. But let's look at some of the other things that are happening here, right? So what we're doing in month one is we now have to invest in inventory. So we're going to buy 4 months worth of inventory at a time, and 4 times 25 is $100. So when we do our production run, we're spending $100 at a time, okay? So we do our production run in month one, we've now got $100 worth of inventory on the balance sheet. What was going to happen in month two is we sell 25 of that, then we sell 25 again, then we sell 25 again, 25 again. So at the end of month five, if we didn't produce again, we'd actually be out of inventory. But we have a CFO working with us, and so we can forecast this, and we go, all right, I know that I'm going to be out of stock at the end of the 5th month, so I need to produce more. So what happens in month 5 is we do the same thing again, right? We buy another $100 worth, and you can see how that cycle repeats. So the gray is being sold here, the yellow is being sold here, and then the gray is being sold here. So what you can see now is a slightly different pattern in terms of the ending cash. And for all of these examples, as we're going through them, the row that I want you to pay attention to the most is the ending cash row down the very, very bottom, right? So before it was all in the green. We never had a negative number here. And so we've got to change. Now, at the risk of, avoiding confusion here, I do want to just clarify that you can't actually have a negative cash balance, right? No bank is going to let you overdraw your checking account by $100 or $1,000. So really what's happening when you have a financial model like this spitting out negative numbers is it's telling you that we have an unmet financing need. And in this case, the unmet financing need is $100. So we have to find a way to finance that $100 shortfall that we have. So I'm going to ask you guys the same question again and give you the same 3 options as before. Would you finance this with A, debt, B, equity, or C, would you bootstrap it? C, thank you, Paula. Nice to see you here. Jeanette is a B for equity, and Dimitri's an A. Latasha is also an A. Cool. I'm seeing a couple of A's here. And again, there isn't any one right answer to these questions, but I would probably lean towards an A here. And the reason I say that, and A being debt, the reason I say that is that we have a short-term financing need here, right? We need $100, but we only need it for 1 month. Okay. The big difference between debt and equity is that debt can be short-term, equity is usually permanent. If you sell a chunk of your company to an investor, they're there for the long haul, right? They're there unless they have some, secondary market event, and maybe like a few years down the road, they manage to sell their shares to someone, or maybe you do a buyback, or maybe eventually you have an exit and, all of the equity gets acquired. But generally, like, equity is a long-term thing, and it usually does not make sense to use long-term sources of capital to finance short-term cash flow needs, which is why in this case, I would be kind of leaning towards debt if you can get it. Now, the challenge that you'll have here is you're a brand new business, right? You've got no history. In month 1, you don't actually have any sales. You're a brand new startup, and you don't really have any credibility yet, right? Most lenders are going to want to see some history of credibility. They're going to ask you for whatever, your past bank statements or your financial statements or whatever. They want to know that you're actually a reputable business. So although, it would be nice to finance this with debt, the reality is that it may not be an option, and you may be forced into, taking longer term capital, even though you don't really need it long term. Just because you're kind of early on and you haven't established credibility yet. Okay, so let's keep evolving this case study, right? Now what I want to do is say, we started talking to Target, and Target wants to sell our product, and Target has 90-day terms. I love Target. I'd love to be able to sell them a lot of volume of product, but 90 days is a long time. And suddenly my cash conversion cycle has gone from this to this. So we now have to finance this cash for a really long amount of time. And remember what I said before, when cash is in this funnel, it's off limits. You cannot access it, right? Um, Cash being scarce, we want to limit that, right? So we've had this big increase in our cash conversion cycle now because we started dealing with Target. I completely understand that you're going to have different pricing for Target, and you probably wouldn't be selling at $100 again like you were before. But for the sake of keeping the math simple here, I've kept the P&L the same, so we still have our $75 of profit per month. But what we've done here is we now have what's called an accounts receivable balance. Okay, so in month 0, we produced our inventory and it was sitting on the balance sheet for a little while. Then in month 2, we sold that inventory to Target, but Target didn't actually pay us for that $100 worth of inventory. Therefore, we have a receivable of $100 courtesy of Target. Same thing happens in month 3. Again, Target doesn't pay us. So now they owe us $100 from month 2 plus another $100 from month 3. So now we have an accounts receivable balance of $200, and that's going to continue into month 4. By month 5, we're going to start getting paid by Target, right? We had 90-day terms equals 3 months. So what's going to happen is that this sale here in month 2 would get paid out by Target here, and so our accounts receivable balance doesn't grow anymore. But anyway, really, the point of this example here is to show you that we've now got a really long or significantly longer need for cash, right? We went from needing cash for only 1 month. We needed $100 for 1 month before. We now need $100 for 5 months, right? Our cash needs have ballooned out. They're 5 times longer than they were before, all because we started dealing with Target and they have these payment terms. And so again, like coming back to the financing question, like how do we do this? Well, yes, you could possibly do it for a loan. Like, sure, you can definitely get 5-month loans. You can get multi-year loans if you want to. But you know, the financing needs have gotten more complicated because we started selling with someone that has payment terms, right? And we got to find a way to get this cash from somewhere. So the final iteration of this particular example is we're going to add back in this accounts payable period, which is the last piece of the cash conversion cycle. So we go to our supplier and say, hey, you know what? I just started dealing with Target. They're really screwing us on payment terms. Can you do me a solid favor, man? I need to get payment terms on this product. Like I can't afford you to pay you as soon as you're delivering it, like I have been. And the supplier says, yeah, sure, no worries. You're a nice guy. Let's do it. So let's remodel this. Once again, exactly the same P&L, still $75 profit. But what we have now coming up is we have this accounts payable balance. So in month 1, we took on $100 worth of inventory, but we have an accounts payable balance as well because of our payment terms with the vendor and supplier. And what happens here is that our need for cash has actually shrunk a little bit. So previously we needed this $100 for 5 months. Now we only need it for 3 months. So financing this business, I think, just got a little bit easier, right? So to wrap these kind of 4 different scenarios together, what I've done on this chart is basically consolidate the 4 different ending cash balances. I'm going to sound like a crack record here, but I want to emphasize these businesses all have the same monthly profit, right? The profit and loss statement, at least to the EBITDA level, would be exactly the same, but the ending period cash balances are vastly different. And this happened because of decisions that we made about how we source, manufacture, and sell our product. We chose to take on an investment in inventory. Therefore, we have to finance that inventory. We chose to sell to Target. Therefore, we have to finance the accounts receivable. And so, like all of these decisions in terms of the way you run and operate your business, like they're going to impact your need for cash. And this is really, the point that I want to hammer home here. And this again, like, is the sort of thing that fractional CFOs can potentially help you with. My view is that, before getting into this, I spent nearly a decade on Wall Street, and a big part of my job was basically like trying to figure out how to forecast the future with financial models. And I'm of the belief that the better the forecast you have and the better the financial models that you're running, the clearer the picture that you can develop of the future. And when you have a clear picture of the future, you know what's going to come at you and you know when it's going to happen, it makes it so much easier to be prepared, right? Whether it's thinking about, all right, I need to hire more people because demand's taking off and I don't have enough people to ship these orders, or I need to cut my advertising spend because I'm going to be tight on cash in a few months, or it's that I need to renegotiate a debt facility because I'm running out of money, like whatever it is. Sorry, Alice, could you help me with muting someone there? I'm hearing a fair bit of background noise coming through. I'm not sure if whoever can hear me, but it would be good if you can go back on mute. Thank you. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of what, a big part of what CFOs can do, right? We can help you look into the future, anticipate what is coming at you down the road, and be better prepared for it. Now, I'm going to make things a little more complicated. We're going to run through this next set of examples much quicker, but things just got a bit more expensive for our little widget co. Before, we were buying stuff at $25, selling it for $100, and we had a $75 margin. Cost just went up. We're now buying the product for $70. We're selling it for $100, so the margin has dropped to only $30, okay? Significantly lower margin business than what we had before. So let's look at these examples. I ignore this here. It should be a 70% COGS, but we got $100 sales, 70% COGS, $30 profit. Once again, in our scenario A, we have this gradually increasing cash balance like before. And I would argue that this is probably still a good candidate for bootstrapping, right? We're generating cash quickly and a cash balance is just growing and growing and growing. Remember what we did in the version B is we introduced a inventory holding period. There's a couple of important differences now though. Number one, the inventory is more expensive, okay? So if we want to buy 4 months at a time, previously it cost us $100. Now we've got 4 times 70 equals $280. So this number here was previously 100. We've now got $280 worth of inventory that we need to finance. The other big difference is that we've obviously got lower margin. We've got less cash being generated by the operation. So the analogy I would give you there is we're kind of digging ourselves into a deeper hole, right? And we're crawling out of that hole more slowly than we were before. I mean, if we look at the ending cash balance again, wow, okay, we're all over the place here. Like, all right, we're starting off negative 280. We only needed 100 before. It's like negative 280 now. And then it goes positive a few months later. Then it goes negative again. Then it's positive. Then it's negative. So we've actually got kind of like multiple cycles here of, the cash requirements. So this would either be 3 separate short-term loans, or maybe this could be a line of credit, a facility that you've got some flexibility and you can draw down when it's needed. But besides the point, like, I guess what I'm wanting you to understand here is that the financing needs for this business just got a lot more complicated, right? When we had our earlier example, introducing of inventory, all we had is negative $100 at the start, and from there it was positive. That was simple to finance. This just got a good deal more complicated, and the only thing we changed was the operating margin, right? So in example C, enter target, once again, our friends with our 90-day payment terms. And oh my goodness, there's a lot of red down the bottom here, right? So we now got this accounts receivable thing going on. And yes, Miggy, it sounds like you're feeling the pain of this, perhaps. Maybe got some good stories to share. So yeah, a whole lot of red down the bottom here. And even, this goes into year 2 probably, maybe even beyond, I don't know. So how are we going to finance this? I'm going to open this one up for questions again because a lot's changed since we last talked about the best financing option here. Do we want to A, do this with debt? B, is this a good candidate for equity? Or C, do you think you can bootstrap this? Paul is a B. Okay. Anyone else want to chime in? Another B from Latasha. Thank you. I think you guys are on the money. Yeah. I mean, this is a long-term cash need, right? It extends well into year 2, possibly even further. And we haven't even started talking about other retailers yet. This is just Target. Like, what if we're also selling to Walmart or Whole Foods or like God knows who else? Like, and they also have payment terms. And what if our co-packer ends up being useless and we don't have any sales for 2 months? Or what if we're dealing with someone who actually is late on their payment? We agreed to 90 days, but they said, screw you, little startup. I'm not going to pay you for 120 days. Like this cash situation here could easily go out of control when you start adding in additional sales channels, additional products, like just the freaking realities of life, like running a startup, things go wrong all the time. And so financing this with debt, I would suggest is very, very risky. So I 100% agree with Paula and Latasha here that this is probably a much better candidate for equity. So final version before we kind of move to wrapping things up here is we got our terms again, our suppliers supporting us, they're giving us the 30 days. And really all I want to point out here is that we still got a lot of red, but again, it got a little bit better. So once again, we had 4 different examples, all had the same $70 profit. The P&Ls were very, very similar, at least if we're using accrual-based accounting. And what you're looking at here is 4 very, very different pictures in terms of the cash needs. And that's why kind of the theme of this whole presentation. And, the point is that like the way that you make and sell your product, right? It can have a very, very big impact on your cash needs and the way that you would think about financing your business. When we look at the first set of examples, the scenario 1 versus scenario 2. So on the left, you've got your 75% margin. Was it 70, 75? Anyway, your high margin. On the right-hand side is the low crappy margin. I think we're only doing $30 there. What I want you to appreciate here is the impact of a high and low margin business. And hopefully this side-by-side contrast gives you an appreciation for why your investors care so much about things like unit economics and operating margins. Well, it's right here. Like this is why they care, because look at the difference in the cash needs, right? So at the risk of stating the obvious, like life gets so much easier for you when you have strong margins. And, this is why another one of the services that I offer is profit coaching, right? The better that we can make your profits and margins, the more you can move towards the left and away from the situation on the right. And if you can get more like the picture on the left, you have less cash needs, you're an easier business to finance, you have a greatest buffer of safety, and in the certain event that something goes wrong, it's going to be much quicker and easier for you to recover from that. So, high margin is a much easier business to scale, and it's usually makes financing it a lot more straightforward as well. So the moral of the story, just as I wrap things up here, and we will be opening up to Q&A in 1 or 2 minutes. So if you guys want to start queuing up the questions, and now would be a good time to do that. But the moral of the story here is that the way that you make, source, and sell your product is going to have a very, very significant impact on both the type and the amount of financing that your business needs. At Future Ready, I'm a fractional CFO, which basically means that I help startups with decisions and thinking through their finances and addressing many of the issues that we talked about today. The services that I offer basically fall into a few different categories, including profit coaching, which is about setting long-term goals, putting in place KPIs, thinking about where you eventually want to get to with your business. Is it a lifestyle business? Do you want to exit? Like, what are the things we need to do to help your vision for the future actually come to life? We can also help with fundraising support. So financial modeling, evaluating debt and equity options, like determining your future financing needs and getting you ready to move into those financing needs. And finally, we do a lot of financial forecasting. So that's inventory and demand planning, it's cash flow forecasting, it's building out your profit and loss, and of course your balance sheet projections. Here's my intro that I did not give at the beginning, but a little bit about why I think myself and what I'm doing here is a little bit different to some of the other fractional CFOs in the space. First of all, I'm future focused. So most fractional CFOs are former accountants and controllers, which is unquestionably a very, very important function. But what accountants do is basically explain and categorize the past. Most of my personal experience in the finance industry is on Wall Street, where we looked into the future. So I've got basically a decade worth of experience now doing this sort of stuff for a living, and I am much, much more practiced at looking into the future than I am explaining and categorizing the past. Second thing, I'm one of the lead mentors with a accelerator program called Food Future Co. Paula, who's in the chat here, we actually met at a FFC event last week. So FFC basically focuses on food, beverage, and AgTech startups. And I guess through that and working in the space for a few years now, I have a pretty solid network. The final thing is I can bring a founder's perspective. So I am a former brand owner myself. I scaled my own company from a Kickstarter through to a 7-figure brand. So I've been in your shoes. Like, I know what it's like to have doubts about whether or not you're going to make payroll. I know what it's like to have no clue about how you're going to be able to finance a purchase order next month. Like, I have, I've been in the trenches, and through bootstrapping this business, I kind of learned a lot about how to be scrappy, how to be resourceful, and I think it kind of adds a layer of perspective to servicing you guys now as a CFO, because I kind of know what it's like to be where you're at. So final thing I'll say before we wrap things up and open the floor for Q&A is that if any of you would like to connect, there's a couple of QR codes here. You can pull out your phone and scan the one on the left if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you would like to schedule a call about CFO stuff, startups, or whatever else is on your mind, then use the QR code on the right, and we can set something up as early as next week. So yeah, that's about it, Alice. That's all I had prepared.
Thank you, Nate.
Thank
Such
you.
a wonderful session. I personally, I enjoyed it a lot. I especially like your approach of this staircase steps to show, a simple example and then more complicated example. With that being said, I'm gonna open the floor to the audience. If you have a question, I would ask you kindly type your question in the chat and raise your hand, and we're gonna call your name to open up and have a discussion with Nate. I'm actually gonna throw a question by myself, Nate, to get it started while
Sure.
people
Don't
are
make
thinking.
it too hard. I don't want to get embarrassed here, Alice.
Oh, no, of course not. So you talk about, I love the concept because as CFOs, we like cash conversion cycle is actually one of the blocks I have on my Pocket CFO's landing page. It's so crucial to CPG startups.
Mm.
The question I want to ask is, do you have any like can you give some guideline in terms of, because I know we have probably a bunch of food and bev brands startups
Mm.
here. We may have some other founders from adjacent verticals. Do you have a guidance in terms of what would be a good range of cash conversion cycle for, let's say, food and bev? You also
Yeah.
talk about, margins, right? Again, I
Mm.
think if you could shed some light on that, but
Mm.
do feel free if you don't want to shed some light for whatever reason.
No,
But
I'm
if
happy
you
to.
do, I
It's
think
just,
that might be helpful.
yeah. Yeah, good question. And I don't want to don't want to give the impression that I'm dodging it, but like it depends, right? It all depends on how your business works. So, if you're sourcing product domestically and you are using domestically sourced packaging, for example, then you're likely to have a shorter cash conversion cycle. But the exact same product that is relying on packaging that might be imported from China or somewhere else, it could be sitting on a boat for a couple of months. So, that automatically adds a couple of a couple of months to, the inventory piece of this. It also depends on how you're selling this product, right? Like a lot of uh, uh, e-com startups are doing direct to consumer, obviously. And, a customer comes along, purchases from you on Shopify or whatever. You're going to have that cash in your bank within a couple of days, like after, Shopify's cleared it. So that's very different to if you're dealing with a Fair or a Walmart or a Target or a Whole Foods or one of the big distributors, right? Like they all have very, very different profiles. So rather than, I mean, I don't really feel like it's the sort of thing where you can reasonably talk about industry-wide standards. I think context is really, really important here. And we need to look at like, what is the product? Where are you sourcing it from? Do you have control over your vendors and suppliers? And are you able to negotiate, payment terms? Um,
That's
you know,
fair. And then talk to
there's
Nate to figure it out, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So really,
Sounds
really what
good.
we need to do is kind of understand the landscape of the business,
Uh-huh.
and look at what makes sense based on, how each business is operating because they're all different.
All right, makes sense. We do have one question from Paula. Paula, you want to unmute and ask the question?
Oh yeah, so it's basically just quick question. So do CFOs also help with pricing strategies or like, do you guys also look at how you should price certain things? Or like, and also one other question is if does your cash conversion cycle affect like margins? Is that something that you also need to take into consideration? Because I've heard from some people saying that oh, if it actually takes you this much time to get your money back, then the value of the money that you're collecting is actually lower. It's not really $100, but it's much lower than that because of the time that is like,
Hmm.
that you had to wait for the money to be sent to you or something like
Yep,
that.
all good questions. Excellent questions. I love it. Thank you. Okay, so with respect to pricing, I wouldn't say that it's traditionally part of a scope for a CFO. Pricing and pricing strategy, might fall more in the realm of marketing, but CFOs are typically people who are good with numbers and analytical tasks. So I'm sure that most CFOs would be able to at least offer an opinion on that sort of thing, depending on, what the product is and how it's being sold. Where a CFO could definitely help is having a conversation with you about unit economics. Like, okay, you've done your research, you understand the market, you understand the customer, you have an idea about where you think pricing should be. Then you come to your CFO and go, hey, does this make sense? Your CFO should be able to go yes or no, and here's why. Doesn't make sense because you need to allow for this distribution margin, this amount of returns, whatever, and like you're going to lose money if you price it there. So that's definitely the sort of information and insight a CFO should be able to have. You also asked about, I guess, uh, some of the additional costs associated with this inventory stuff. And that's a really good point. I intentionally kind of skimmed over that because I didn't want to make things too complicated before, but there's definitely a payoff here, right? So if we think about our scenario B, right, where we decided that we wanted to invest in 4 months worth of inventory, a common motivator for that, as I said, would be that we're getting lower costs and we have better operating margin theoretically as a result of doing that. But the flip side is by doing that, as you recall, we generated this financing need. Okay. This is not money that's just going to come out of thin air. Interest rates aren't zero anymore. If you have that need for finance, there's going to be a cost of that, which will come either in the form of dilution, right? If you're dealing with equity investors, you will be diluting yourself because you're giving away part of the company. Or if you're dealing with debt, then it's going to come in the form of interest. And it may very well be that the savings that you're getting by buying in bulk and lowering your unit costs, they could be completely offset by interest. And it might be that by the time you kind of work all this out and look at these pluses and minuses, you might actually not make sense to invest in all this inventory. Another piece of this that I intentionally left out was like the storing and warehousing costs, right? In the example A, we had a business where inventory was coming in and out very, very quickly. And so we don't really need to store anything. Like we don't need a warehouse because we're just selling and shipping stuff as soon as it gets bought. But in scenario B, we're buying 4 months at a time. So we got to put that somewhere. We got to pay for the pallets or the racks or whatever it is that we're storing the stuff on. And so there's going to be a warehousing cost as well. So certainly in thinking about decisions like this, you definitely want to take a holistic view because there are many moving parts. Like, yes, the operating margin performance might be attractive, but you're going to be paying for it in other ways. You'll have higher storage and warehouse costs. You might have risk of the items going bad. Like we're talking about items with expiry dates or perishable goods. There's a threat that at some point you might need to throw some of them away because maybe they reach their expiry date. Like that's a risk too. And there's also the financing piece that comes with it. So, there's, pluses and minuses to it all.
Okay, thank you. That was very insightful.
You're welcome. Thanks for jumping on, Paula.
Nate, we've got another question from Natasha. I'm just gonna read it out since she seems like cannot unmute. So she's saying she's a bookkeeper for a CPG business. She's asking, do you offer coaching? I suppose yes. She says she's new to advisory service and have been recently working with her client on their cash flow management and hitting milestone for investors to get funding. I guess you want to elaborate on your coaching or just elaborate on answering her question?
Sure. Yeah. So most of the coaching that I'm looking to do is really focused on working with the founders and the entrepreneurs. I'm candidly also relatively new to this, so I certainly don't consider myself a seasoned long-term expert here. So what maybe the best thing to do here is reach out via LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat a little bit more about this if we could kind of clarify what you're looking for there. But I guess the main takeaway here is that like I'm happy to help. I'm passionate about this space. I have a lot of respect and appreciation for entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurial journey, and more than happy to give back and help out where I can. So if you are interested, happy to jump on a call with you. You can set up a time here for a call next week, or we can chat over LinkedIn if you prefer.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Nate. And my autopilot, AI Copilot has already summarized the note
Wow.
here in the chat box. Anyway, any other questions? You want to raise your hand or type your question in the chat box? And Nate, I want to ask you, obviously you are offering coaching one-on-one, working with founders. Do you, because last time we talked, were you still in the process of launching your kind of like a masterclass program? Are you
Yes.
in the process of doing something?
Yeah, still on the cards. I have not launched it yet. So for the benefit of those who might be scratching their heads and wondering what Alice is talking about. When Alice and I first connected, I was looking at basically launching a kind of finance boot camp. I am still very interested in that idea. I've decided that it's not my immediate priority, and I'm kind of focused on retainer clients at the moment. But Paula, who is in the chat, her and I actually had a conversation earlier this week, I think, about that boot camp. And yeah, so the concept is basically what I am wanting to do is to make finance education more affordable and accessible for early stage founders. And I am cognizant of the fact that a lot of early stage people cannot necessarily afford thousands of dollars a month for a fractional CFO. And so the concept that Alice is asking about here is that I have been developing basically a group format session, which would be an 8-week program where we get you in and kind of teach you through, teach you about all the different aspects of finance. So we talk about the P&L, the balance sheet, cash flow statement, 13-week cash flow modeling, etc. And kind of the goal being to really empower people to have intelligent conversations with investors and other stakeholders about their own business, and really feel a lot more confident in and around their own financials. So if that educational type approach is something that folks are interested in here, it's an idea that I've got on the back burner, and I would be more than happy to talk about bringing it to the front burner again if there was enough demand and interest.
Well, if you're interested, feel free to type yes here. I'm plugging in for Nate. Anyway, I think we're near the end. Oh, here you go.
Okay.
You've got Paula, I guess. All right, we're almost at the end of the session. I want to thank Nate again for a wonderful session about cash flow management. Nate has the QR code here. If you want to connect with him or get in touch with him, feel free to schedule a call or connect on LinkedIn. I'm Alice. I'm the host. I'm co-founder of MyPocketCFO. I think the vision of MyPocketCFO is to collaborate with the best and most startup CPG friendly CFOs. So Nate, I look forward to more collaboration projects with you. We can chat definitely
Likewise.
offline.
Yep.
I think what we are building is more of a software platform to real-time generate, I would say, again, lender-friendly and investor-friendly financials, which is the historical and current state. That can be readily available for CFOs to analyze and discuss strategic moves with the founders. So anyway, with that being said, Nate, what do you think? Should we close out the session?
Yeah.
And I think the plan is to send out, Nate, if you are okay, I'm gonna send out the recording to the
Absolutely, yeah.
to the audience and people who registered. And then whoever, we would love to see you again next time.
Okay. Sounds good.
Sounds good?
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
hosting me. I really, really appreciate the opportunity and excited to be part of the community here. So thank you again.
Awesome. Same here. It's great to have you, Nate, in the community. Great to have everyone joining today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. We'll chat
Thanks, guys. Take
later.
care. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.